So welcome. We're really, really pleased to have you here. We know you had many choices, and we're glad that you chose us today. This is an amazing panel on efficiency in supply chain through AI. So my name is Jennifer Rogers. I have the distinct pleasure of working with IEEE around Learning Technology Standards Committees and essentially the ways in which we approach supply chain from a workforce perspective. So I will be sharing some of my insights throughout the journey here this afternoon around workforce supply chain aspects. But without further ado, I will pass it along to some of my esteemed colleagues here who will tell you a little bit about themselves and what they're going to be sharing in terms of their unique perspective on the panel. So I will turn it next to Subbu.
Thank you. I'm Subbu Iyer. I run the data sciences team for forecasting over at Target. We do forecasting across the enterprise for supply chain, merchandising, finance, various decisions, essentially any decision that requires some kind of a forecasting input. My team provides that. I'm kind of an accidental data scientist. I didn't set out to be a data scientist. I went into college thinking I would be a professor. And the moment I saw how much effort it was to write grants and walk around with a begging bowl to NSF and DARPA and whoever, I decided that's not what I wanted to do. So then I went into the tech industry, and then I decided that was too boring. I went into finance. I decided it was too cold to live in New York. So I moved to California, and I do retail now. And every so often I go to Minnesota to remind myself how cold it really is out there. So pass it on to...
Hi, I'm Rajnesh Tangri. I work for Teradata. So if you don't find bananas at Target, now you know who to call, right? This guy. So that's a demand forecast. Something went wrong, and he needs to readjust his models. Having said that, I'm with Teradata. I've been with Teradata for almost 8 years. I belong to a strategy role. I've played multiple roles within the organization, everything ranging from a techie to a business-facing to sales. But I think my heart is still with the technology, hardcore technology industry, so that's why I'm here. Love to talk about supply chain. I have primary focus on manufacturing and AI. So I would love to quote some examples from my experience working with number of customers and talk to you about where is it that they succeeded, but most importantly, where they failed, right? What is it that they could adjust in what they're doing so we could not repeat those same mistakes?
Yes, thanks, Rajnesh. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jie I'm with Johnson & Johnson. So apparently, this is a very diverse panel, right? So we come from all different industry sectors. Actually, I'm with J&J about a year and a half. And before that, actually, I also work in different sectors. I work in oil and gas and energy sector. I was with Shell for 13 years. But my whole career was really around digital transformation, AI, machine learning, and data science. So even back to 15 years ago when I was in graduate school, my research at that time when AI was not so hot as today, my research was already focused on AI, machine learning, building neural network models at that back to that time. So in J&J, I really manage a digital product management team at enterprise level across different business sectors. So J&J right now focus on two big sectors. One is the pharmaceutical sector. The other is medical device, medical technology sector. So my team support both sectors at a global portfolio across all the regions. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jay. So we're going to go ahead and get started with some of the questions that we've prepared for you all today. We've tried to keep them relatively diverse so that all of the diverse perspectives that we have on the panel have a chance to weigh in. So the first question is really around looking at the business side of supply chain analytics and AI. We talk a little bit around the value that AI brings to supply chain. Let's expand that a little bit to just value chain in general. And I'd really love to hear from you guys, how AI is adding value to your supply chain operations, and particularly as it relates to organizational strategy and articulation of the value chain. And I'd love it if you could provide as many examples as you can or anecdotes so that our audience can get a good understanding of how AI is making a difference in your organization.
Absolutely, happy to do that. So let's take a step back, right? Supply chain is probably one of the most diverse set of value chain activities, but it's extremely intertwined, extremely interconnected. A small little adjustment of parameters in one segment, it's like squeezing the balloon on one side and it has an impact on the other end. So that presents a very interesting challenge, right? We all need to be super agile. And if you guys have been associated with supply chain, how many of your organizations do your S&OP once a quarter or once a month or once every few weeks? That agility to translate what's happening on the street to what's happening in your business across your supply chain activities is what's needed. And today the technology can support that agility. So where does AI fit into that model, right? We don't manage by rules, but we manage by exceptions. Where is it that our parameters are getting out of their standard threshold ranges? Where is it that you see new patterns evolving? Where is it that your production cycles are seeing something that is so unique that you haven't assessed it yet? In fact, I have one of my customers, they were trying to get asset productivity, and the asset productivity can easily be measured by the throughput that you're getting through the different machines. Now, that's a good measure, but there are so many different influencers into that process. There is material, there's people, and then there is also the environment, right? So if AI was playing into through sensors, through robotics, through managing all the different dependent variables, assessing what could influence that productivity and how you can fine-tune that process, that takes the human element out of the mix. Now, you don't have to wait for a shift. You don't have to wait for an entire planning cycle. You don't have to wait for certain events before you react to something that has happened on the shop floor. And that's just being one of those explanations, right? Recently, Panama Canal, we had a blockage, shipping blockage. There's issues happening getting the ships over to United States borders. If we had that visibility and we could track what's happening along the supply chain, and our AI algorithms were equipped to replan our manufacturing processes, our impact on customers, then we can eliminate or mitigate some of those impacts in the supply chain. So to me, that's a very powerful and a very robust opportunity for us, and we need to embrace that.
So, I don't think this works. Okay. One of the things that pretty much every retailer goes through is there's a wide variety of activities that need to be done. So you have planning, which is kind of at the long end or long range. And then there is very operational things on the other end of the spectrum. So you have to think about, I don't know, how many cases of bananas do I send to the store next week so it's not out of stock, right? So one of the things that we find is that when you have decisions that are small in scope and easily reversible, if we send too few boxes of bananas this week, maybe we'll send more boxes next week if we know that there's more demand, right? So those kind of things can be easily automated. Like you don't need humans babysitting those processes, right? Whereas how much grocery are we going to sell next year? Like that's a huge decision. You don't want an AI completely automating that decision. It's probably not going to come up with the right answer. It might not, but why would you leave that to chance?
Yeah, just to add, right? So before I answer this question first, so I would definitely explain a little bit what supply chain means to J&J. So I know even between my experience between Shell and J&J, supply chain function means differently as well. So in J&J, supply chain is really one third of the business portfolio. In addition to R&D, product R&D, as well as commercial, which is essentially the sales marketing part of the business. So supply chain covers all the way up from planning to sourcing, which is essentially procurement, to make, which is manufacturing process, then to deliver, which is basic customer service, logistics, transportation, and also cover the quality and compliance as well. And understand, healthcare is very heavily regulated industrial sector, so the quality and compliance is a big part of the business too. So supply chain cover, really kind of across all the business functions, right, throughout the entire organization. And when we drive the digital transformation, so the whole value concept, or the value proposition, is really the core part of the digital transformation in J&J. Nowadays, we really see the value of data science technology penetrated to every corner of the business. So I think maybe build on what Rajnesh just mentioned. One example I give you, in the past couple of years, you guys have seen, who work in supply chain have seen all those disruptive events happening in the supply chain, right? Global supply chain, which affect healthcare, which affect J&J as well. So we have put together a very kind of cutting edge technology program called Supply Chain Resilience. We really try to bring in those cutting edge AI and machine learning technology, right, to sense what's going to happen, right? If any kind of disruptive events in the supply chain happens in the global supply chain network, what kind of impact to J&J's business? And then we kind of trace all the way back to the source material, and even in our supply chain network in J&J, we have more than 50,000 suppliers and vendors in the system. So we understand, hey, if something happening in certain region, in certain country, how that impact our finished goods, our final products, no matter it's medical device or it's pharmaceutical products like drugs. And then we identify the optimal alternative solution, right, to try different suppliers, different manufacturing locations of those suppliers, right, to mitigate that impact. For example, like Ukraine-Russian war a couple years back, right? So lots of impact in Europe and around the globe as well. So a big part of our supply chain network got impacted. So a big lesson learned from there is how to really, when those kind of situation happen in the future, how we can do in more predictive and a preventive way, right? And also lots of things we have to consider into the capital investment as well to build the alternative capacity in partnership with our suppliers and vendors together. So definitely AI play a big role in that space. Another quick example I want to mention is maybe the demand forecasting. So that's another big part. Actually, even within J&J, between commercial organization and my supply chain organization, we have to internally collaborate very closely because that demand, right, impact my manufacturing capacity. And for example, if I just use pharmaceutical sector as an example, the capacity building takes 3 to 5 years. So that long-term demand forecasting play a big role, right, to really kind of give us very robust portfolio forecasting 3 to 5 years down the road, right? If you are building this plant 3 to 5 years down the road, right, do we still have that kind of enough demand, right, to absorb that kind of capacity we added to the manufacturing? So yeah, and AI, ML definitely adding lots of value across those different areas. Yeah.
Thanks, Jay. That's fantastic. And it's interesting, my observation as I'm sitting here and listening, we've talked about a lot of different aspects already around that value chain, right? We've talked about infrastructure, we've talked about logistics, we've talked about product on both sides. And from my perspective, being the representative on this panel from IEEE, we talk a lot about advancing humanity through technology. And so part of where I get really excited about AI is a lot of the emerging standards and capability that we have around enabling the human experience with AI in light of the fact that AI is changing the nature of work. And so where I get really excited is we have the capability now to be able to, for example, do dynamic capability mapping to look at organizations against scenario plans and determine what an organization needs to look like now and in the future, and constantly be looking at, do we have the right people on board, and more importantly, are they proactively prepared for that change? Are we seeing their skills adapt in a way in which if we intend to play out a particular scenario, or if a scenario happens, like COVID or something like that we've already proactively planted the skill sets within our organizations to ensure that they thrive. So that's a great example of AI actually working to advance humanity in light of the fact that AI is changing everything about our landscape and the way that we work. So thanks, everybody. Let's transition to the next question. And this one is one that we hear a lot. We know that scale is sometimes a challenge when we look at AI in enterprises. And what I'd love for you guys to do is just kind of reflect a little bit around the aspects that come into play when we think about scale. So we can look at this from a lot of different angles. We can look at it at the value of AI. We can talk about building trust amongst stakeholders. We can look at the changing operational processes and business processes, as well as different tool sets and infrastructure. We can think about change management and all of those aspects. So I'd love for each one of you to kind of think about where you see scale being the biggest challenge for you right now. Kind of describe to us what that looks like and any ideas or lessons learned that you've already applied that are helping to deal with that challenge around scale.
A couple of thoughts come to mind. So one is, as I said earlier, there are decisions that need to be made at different scales and different time horizons, different magnitudes, different collection of stores or different levels, different grains of the business. One aspect is trying to create this synchronization across all these. And the only way to do that, so that necessarily becomes a cross-enterprise effort, it's a cross-functional effort. So the solutions need to be co-created between technology, data science, AI, the various lines of business, and creating that co-creation, that culture of creating solutions together between technology and the users of the solutions is a big way of driving adoption. And that also makes change management easier, because a lot of times the challenges in deriving value have to do with changing how certain processes operate. Legacy processes that are entrenched, how do we derive value from those? How do we convince people to change some of those? One thing that we have found useful is coupling the change in technology to some other more mundane activity. So every so often, like every company pretty much goes through this. Every few years, we upgrade our hardware. We upgrade the servers, or we upgrade the software stack. You change the operating system, or you go from Hadoop 2 to Hadoop 3. You have some migration or the other going on, right? So basically, you make it conditional on adoption of the next generation of technology. And that makes it easier to drive that adoption. So you say, hey, we want to ensure some consistency in reports across the enterprise. So when we make our next database change, when we move off of one system to another system, we make it conditional on people adopt better hygiene. And we don't support the old broken ways of doing things in the new system, right? So that helps us, that's one way to help us drive adoption and ensure change happens at scale.
Perfect. So I'll take a couple of dimensions to this question. The first dimension for scale, technology is an enabler, right? At the end of the day, what are we using technology for? Either make more money or save money, right? So let's shift the focus to what is the business wanting to do with this technology? And how do you get that scale? Is you're enabling that technology, you're putting that technology to the purpose for what the business wants from you. And how do you do that, right? Supply chain, as I talked about earlier, is a very diverse and a very broad topic. Where is it that you're going to get the time to value, you're going to show quick success, and you're going to win the hearts and mind of people who are willing to adopt that technology to scale? So that's a scaling of that technology within an organization that automatically translates into scaling of that technology and the application of that technology into in cross-business functions. So that's the first part of scaling. I personally am a finance expert, and I can tie every corporate KPI to every business function, and I can give you with precision the impact of 1% efficiency gain on the top line and the bottom line, and price to earning ratio that translates into your stock price. I can do that for any company, anytime. And if your numbers are published, I can do that. That's an easy part, right? But what's the hard part is translating that into an adoption model with your executives, is to show them how that is going to impact your business. What's the requirement for adopting that technology to make that, to improve your top line revenue? So that's one part of scale in my mind. The second part of scale is technology, right? We are all familiar with XGBoost. It's meant to scale. But if you use the right technology to push that XGBoost into your data engine, these sparsely populated nodes now can be better translated or better handled with lots of performance, so people don't have to wait for 4, 5, 6 hours before you get the result sets of your time series functions. You use the right technology that gives you the SLA that improves the user experience so that you can get that technology adopted without having people to think about, oh, it's too hard, I don't want to use it. Think about it like an iPhone, right? You don't have to think about how the networks are working. You're kind of eliminating that complexity and making it easier for people to use it and adopt it and further propagate the use of that technology within your organization. So to me, the scale is influenced by those two functions.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing to riff off of what you said. So I think we need to stop thinking of it as scaling AI or scaling a technology solution and think of it as there is a business problem to be solved here. Like we need to figure out a way to make more money or save more money or whatever is the objective here. Is there a better way of doing that? And if we can show that there is a better way of doing that than what we are doing right now, and it makes the life of that decision maker easier, then the scaling and adoption problem becomes a no-brainer, right? So that's kind of the way that's most effective in going about doing this.
Yeah, so I mean, the previous question we discussed about the value, right? So really how to accelerate the value proposition, right, of digital technology throughout the organization scaling, right? So that's how you really kind of can see the exponential growth of the value proposition, right? With the same technology solution. And nowadays in J&J, we really we try to not chase any one-off solution, right? We try to drive a lot, this leverageability and scalability. We more focus on, kind of this, product and platform-driven mindset in terms of really kind of drive, to build a leverageable product and even platform, so that which can solve, a group of different problems and with some kind, adaptation of the solution. And in that way, the same investment, right, really kind of, generate exponential value from there. And also, I would like to address this specific question in two aspects. One, scaling is not easy, right? So one is the digital operating model. Nowadays, we put lots of efforts really to build the fit-for-purpose digital operating model in J&J, which kind of can support our digital transformation journey. The other aspect I would like to cover briefly is really the change management, which can be, if we do not do it right, which can be really the hurdle, right, to drive our scaling story. So in terms of basically the digital operating model, we really look at the entire lifecycle management process, right, of digital products. So starting from, identify the right business problems, which then we try to translate into digital problems and map into what kind of, data science, AI, machine learning technology platforms we can solve these kind of problems. And then we try to pick, small scale problem to start with, right, at the POC scale, right, proof of concept. And then, if we gain success with the POC, then we're going to try to build a minimum viable product and then further, move into the scaling phase, right? To try to, roll out to different regions, different countries, and even different business lines and business functions as well. And also, we do not lose sight of the back end of the process, which is really the sustain phase, right? So very often, in our sector, people still kind of used to the old ways of working. Even we try to deploy new technology, right? If we do not put enough efforts to sustain the solution success, after a year or 2 years, we see lots of cases in which the solution basically just falling apart without adequate support from the digital team. So that's kind of the whole digital operating model is very important to really build that kind of culture, digital culture and the DNA, right, in the organization, and also change people's mindset and mentality as well. The second part I want to quickly talk about is change management. In our industrial sector, right, J&J is a company with more than 130-year history, so lots of legacy there, and also lots of old ways of working as well. So we have a company with more than 140,000 employees. So not only just the digital team, data scientists, right, drive the transformation. So we also kind of embed into this change management process. We also put a lot of efforts, right, to do this upscaling and rescaling initiative to really not only just train the digital talent and also the frontline business operational staff, right, give them enough training to understand how the digital tool, right, can solve their problems with less efforts, with reduced resources and cost, right, and much higher efficiency and productivity. So make sure frontline operational staff can see the value of the new digital technology and solutions, and then they are more willing to adopt them and use them in sustainable way as well. And very often, in the AI era today, sometimes people might view AI solution or digital technology as a threat to their job. So that's also, in our culture building, right? We try to change that mentality. Really make sure people understand this is augmented capacity, right, to your day-to-day job. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Jay. I really appreciate that. And appreciate all the perspectives of everyone on the panel. One of the things that I will add, and once again, this is probably with my data standards hat on, but I think from a scalability perspective, it's also really important for us to embrace open data standards as well as governance around that. Once again, when I look at the challenges that I'm trying to solve through work at IEEE, but also I do a fair amount of work with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation where we're trying to solve for the nationwide talent pipeline crisis. It's very important for us as we're looking at people and looking at what they can do and how we can connect them with opportunity, that we're all looking at them in the same way and that they understand the data that we're collecting around them. We've got a suite of standards that really help us to work on that scale. Anything from shareable competency framework data standards to learning experience data standards that show how someone's actually growing dynamically within the workforce and proactively being ready to do new jobs, as well as some pieces around learner employment records that will in the future follow people throughout the course of their lives that they can actually own and control with regards to what institutions actually see about them, but also that is based upon linked data that helps us to define capabilities and skills in a common way across industries to get rid of some of those silos. So I see we've got a hand up there. I'm going to ask one more question and then I'll open it up to the audience. Does that work? Fantastic. Great. So I'm going to ask one more question of you guys. And I know I'm opening up Pandora's box. So these guys are looking to go to happy hour pretty soon. So tell me how you really feel, but let's make sure that we're to the point so we don't stand between them and the beverage that they're planning on having here in a minute. My next question we could talk about all day, but it really has to do with the idea of ethics as it applies to AI, and particularly about responsible AI in supply chains. So I'd love to know how you guys are approaching responsible AI governance, and also in areas like ESG, are we feeling like AI is helping us or it's a threat to what it is we're trying to accomplish? I'll lead us off here and say, from an IEEE SA perspective, particularly our open data initiative is really pretty clear on this. We're really looking for openness, transparency, consensus, and inclusion. We feel like all of those things are really, really critical as we move forward so that people once again understand, particularly because I'm talking about people data, what the syntax of that is, what ontologies are being used, that they can actually see it, understand it, that it's not only machine readable, but human readable, and that they also have the ability to control what institutions receive that data. So there's an ownership component to it. But I'm going to throw it out to the rest of the panel. And Subo, you want to take the next one and just give us an idea?
Yeah, sure. So there is, to your point, there is always all of this, let's figure out the ontology of the data. Let's make sure that everything is captured properly. Let's reduce the number of biases. There's also something to be said about building trust in the processes. If your processes are already robust, then the likelihood that a bad model running amok gets lowered. Because if you build a bad model, if you build a model that's biased, then your processes will catch it. It's no different from a human actor running amok. I mean, like it's very similar. So strengthening your processes and having very robust machinery in place for all of your business activities helps in some sense policing like AI models that might have some biases in it, right? That's one way to go about doing it, I'd say.
So I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm going to ask ChatGPT. I guess that's my way of saying there is absolutely a need for that compliance, governance, control, all of those things. So one of the use cases that one of the things I enjoy coming to these events is because you get to talk to all the vendors and you get to find out what's the industry doing. And there is a vendor back there, and I'm not gonna name vendors, but there's a vendor back there, and their job is really to find where the IP protection, plagiarism, copyright issues, all of that, and it's all embedded through APIs in your framework. And while their applications that they talk about is more in the academia and code control, but my mind immediately goes to IP protection, right? Designs, right? You may have a design that's created by Johnson & Johnson on a particular drug treatment, right? You ask ChatGPT and somebody's posted a message somewhere and it's going to fetch it for you, right? How do you protect against that? There is definitely technology rapidly evolving around that space that's going to protect your assets, which is your IP. And thinking through what that technology is to catch it as it's happening ahead before it becomes a problem is an absolute necessity. And the good news is, just as the application of AIs are meant to catch the anomalies in your data to help you refine your supply chain processes, the technology's evolved enough to catch the anomalies when you have somebody taking over your IP, somebody who's taking over aspects of your business and using it for the wrong purposes. So short and concise. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but that's one of the major aspects that's top of mind. Perhaps just because I ran into that vendor, I thought it was pretty cool.
Great. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, so Rajnesh just mentioned that he's going to rely on ChatGPT to answer this question, right? So actually, in the past few months, ChatGPT and large language model, generative AI, probably the hottest topic in J&J. Every single function, business function and sector, right, which used to have no relationship with AI, try to explore the possibility and the potential, right, to leverage ChatGPT and the large language model, right, to identify lots of new application areas. However, at the enterprise level, our senior leaders, even at the executive committee level, the first thing they did was they released this internal generative AI policy and guidelines to really guide how to use it for responsible AI purpose. Because we are in the healthcare industry sector, so very heavily regulated sector, right? So just to give you an example, we not only supply chain and R&D and commercial even more, right? We deal with patient data, customer data quite a lot, right? So some medical personal health data in there. So that data security, data privacy are crucially important, for in our business. Otherwise, we'll be easily can out of compliance. In terms of government regulations, not only just FDA in the States, right? In Europe, in Asia Pac, all different countries have different regulations. So in that space, actually, specifically for AI ethics and policy, J&J has been in partnership with different government agencies quite closely across regions in the world, right, to really become an influencer in that space. Although we are a pharmaceutical company, we are a healthcare company, but we invest a lot in AI as well. We really view it as the future of healthcare industry, right, AI. So that's why we choose to collaborate with government agencies to drive that policy shaping. Yeah, so this is definitely a very, very critical area. I see that if we do not manage the AI evolvement in responsible way, in ethical way, it can pose high risk to the community, to the world as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jay. I know that we're out of time. I know you guys are so sad and you'd rather sit here and listen to us than go have a drink. But we're going to formally close the panel at this point. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions throughout the rest of the event or even later. We'd love to talk to you about everything that we're experiencing around AI and supply chains. As you can tell, this is a very passionate group of people, so they'd be happy to expound further. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And have a great show.